Hey, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining here. Give me just a second. Let me turn off my friend Adam's music here. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. I am going to do the most of the webinar from the PowerPoint presentation, but I wanted to be able to say hello. There are a lot of faces that I know and names that I know and faces I would love to be sitting in front of in a room having this conversation in person right now, which is pretty much what we say about everything we're doing these days. I appreciate you being here. I am going to get to, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Greg Quiroga. I am a fundraising auctioneer in San Francisco. I have been conducting auctions in San Francisco since 2004. I did my first fundraising auction back in 2004 with an education foundation in Burlingame. Since then, I've conducted on and consulted on over 750 fundraising auctions. I made the pivot to 100% virtual about a month and a half ago, as did the rest of us when everything went down. I conducted my first virtual auction on Saturday, April 4th. Actually, it was just a virtual gala, not a complete auction. I thought I was really late to the game at that point. We used nothing but Zoom chat. The setting you see looks probably pretty familiar to what was just behind me just now. We raised over $900,000 in Zoom chat in under an hour, which was a pretty phenomenal success and a wonderful way to get introduced to doing virtual galas. Virtual galas are most definitely the now. And what we're obviously all here to talk about today is just how into the future that now might be. What we're going to cover. We'll cover the state of fundraising today, cover the 4 phases of galas in 2020. So 100% virtual galas, soundstage galas, micro-galas, and full-blown galas. We'll compare this to California's 4 stages of social distancing restrictions. And I'm going to use California as example because primarily most of us are in California, but also Governor Newsom has laid out a very extensive 4-stage plan that I think is a pretty easy foundation for anybody to utilize. We'll talk about what this means for you. And then at the end, we'll have questions and hopefully some answers as well. Some housekeeping to talk about. This webinar is being recorded, so it's going to be made available to all attendees and in fact a wider audience because we had more people register for this webinar than we have room for. I'll be flattered if you feel compelled to take notes, but don't feel pressured to do so because you'll be able to come back and look at it all later. The state of fundraising in 2020. Obviously, all galas have been shut down since early to mid-March. The reaction at the onset, though, was very regional. If you lived in Portland, you made the switch to virtual galas almost immediately. This is a shot of the Caitlin Gable School auction, which took place on March 14th, 2020. You look at the calendar, that was just 8 days after San Francisco issued its first stay-at-home order, limiting the size of events that people could hold. Portland pivoted quickly. They're currently doing 3 to 5 virtual galas a weekend up there. It almost looks normal, you know, in comparison to what's happened in the Bay Area, because the Bay Area had a radically different reaction. Most events in the Bay Area either canceled or rescheduled for the fall. So I want to start our webinar today by asking a question, which is how many attendees currently have a gala scheduled for this coming fall? If you could just take a moment and say, yeah, our event's always been scheduled in the fall, or yeah, we rescheduled our event to the fall, or no, straight up, we don't have an event happening this fall. And so far, we got 50% of the votes in. It feels this is exciting. It's like doing a virtual auction. We got 67% of the votes in, and right now our event has always been scheduled for fall 2020 is in the lead with 40%. We're just waiting on a few more. We'll give it a couple more seconds for everybody to get a chance to vote. And the vast majority of people on this webinar have their event scheduled for 58. I know there's one person who's calling in. 59 of the votes are in. The vast majority of people here, will call it there so we can get on with it. Let's share the results. The vast majority, 39% say no, our event is not scheduled for the fall. So I appreciate you being here to discuss this. Another 37% are in the fall and 24% are scheduled for the fall. So what this means is that there are a lot of events currently scheduled for September, October, and even November. And collectively, I think we've all been holding our breath, hoping we're going to be able to do our galas. But I'll get into that. I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to take a step back and Go to the prologue, very beginning. One of the chief accomplishments of a fundraising gala is the community it fosters. It's a shared experience that people remember, high-fiving a bunch of kids as you go down the line at a Boys and Girls Club event. It's just things that make you want to come back every year. We form long-term memories when there is an emotion that is tied to a moment. And everybody at this gala remembered this tuxedo-wearing dog. And if there's one thing I can guarantee that half of you will remember today, it's a dog wearing a tuxedo. Coming together to change the world is one of the cornerstones of fundraising events. That's that emotional moment that is an uplifting experience that makes people want to do it again. And I am a huge proponent of fundraising galas in all their iterations. I mean, let's be honest, partially because it's the only option we have for doing fundraising auctions and fund-a-needs right now. But I wouldn't be such a proponent of them if they weren't able to create a sense of community and engagement. This is my friend and buddy, Sam Lando. He's a winemaker up in Sonoma. Obviously, winemakers have been hammered by this as well. They can't do in-person tasting. Sam had 14 fundraising auctions he was scheduled to attend this spring and summer, and obviously that's been out the window. So he got super creative and working with a local restaurant, Dustin Vallette of Vallette's Restaurant in Healdsburg. They created a 3-course wine dinner wine pairing that Sam then set the recipes out to restaurants across the country who sell his wine. And they put together a virtual dinner pack. And people would, on a specific day, by a specific time, people go into the restaurant, they pick up the 3-course meal and the 2 bottles of Sam's wine, they go home, they log on, and Sam hosts them for a wine pairing dinner, knowing that they're all having roughly the same experience. And virtual galas can create community, attract new donors, and raise money with a little creativity and a lot of heart. We aren't going to spend a lot of time today brainstorming creative virtual gala solutions because we simply don't have the time, and that's not what we set out to talk about. At the end, we'll have time for some Q&A, and if you want to bring these or any other virtual gala questions up, we'll discuss it. We'll also find out if people want to do this sort of discussion on a regular basis, because I am happy to talk. It's my job, right? Final thought before we launch into the phases. Every virtual gala has some method of interactivity. It enables attendees to make pledges in the fund-a-need. They bid on auction items. I'm a proponent of greater giving. Their platform is easy to use. You don't have to circle back after the fact to get your money. So for every one of the phases of virtual galas that we're talking about, my presumption is that they have some sort of mobile bidding or pledging component. It doesn't have to be greater giving, but my experience so far has been that their platform is the most ready to pivot and handle something for doing 100% virtual online auction. So phase 1. 100% virtual galas. Well, obviously they're conducted virtually. This is the phase that the Bay Area has been in since March. Every attendee is in a separate venue, broadcasting from their home or their office, conducted 100% sheltering in place. Initially, these were all very last-minute reactive productions. People just jumped on it and said, okay, well, we've got to go do this. My first event we had 2 days to prepare. It was conducted 100% in Zoom. We did the fund-a-need in chat. They raised $900,000, which was a phenomenal success, but they didn't use any sort of mobile bidding platform on the back end. So they had to collect all of that money post-event. Spoiler alert, they still have a healthy 6 figures, $100,000 plus outstanding. Because it's in Zoom does not mean it has to have no production value. On April 7th, I conducted a gala that featured presenters in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, New York, Paris, and Hong Kong. It included the Lieutenant Governor and the CEO of Zoom. That's my meta selfie with Eric on in the middle of our fundraiser. It required a lot of rehearsal to retrain the staff to be a Zoom production team. Everybody had to suddenly learn new roles. And at the end of it, it was still on Zoom. And I'm a proponent of Zoom because we're all here today. But since then, productions have become more sophisticated. This is an event that took place this last Thursday night. It's the Samaritan's House event. It's their virtual gala. This is the co-chair's toast. And this is starting to look more like a television program, or at the very least, a really high-end internet broadcast. Still, everybody's broadcasting from their own home or office, but now we've got more elements incorporated. This event was created on the Lux Productions Lux Live platform Tom and his crew at Lux, we do a ton of fundraising events with them. They pivoted early and came up with a 100% virtual gala solution. This isn't meant to be a pitch for Lux, but they're the ones that I'm using right now, because for those who are curious, we did a mock virtual gala last week with Tom and Beth Sandifer Productions. The link will be available. It looks and feels way more advanced than the pure Zoom galas we're doing, but I think we can say that we're all excited to move on to phase 2, which are soundstage productions. And when shelter in place changes and we can have small groups of 10-ish or so people together in a room, staff and a production team are going to gather at a soundstage or a hotel ballroom or a school stage or some other setting. You're going to have audio visual cameras, a video switcher, staff to run all of this, high bandwidth internet connection, etc. It's going to look and feel very much like a regular gala, but it'll be broadcast to an at-home audience. And Portland has been doing phase 2 galas all along. They had different shelter in place restrictions, and their community had a different reaction to the outbreak in general. So they've been doing these dual, soundstage events from the very beginning. They allow for a more natural feel to the event. You have interaction between presenters. You can have your MC and your auctioneer on stage so that they're playing off of each other, so there's not the dead air if there happens to be any. Also, it just makes for a better looking production. It eliminates a lot of the possible errors that you could have of a presenter clicking on the wrong link, or someone relying on spotty Wi-Fi and their video going all grainy, etc. And the variety show format, let's be honest, crowds are used to the variety show format. At this point, it's very familiar look. And if you stream to YouTube Live or one of the other smart TV ready platforms, your guests can watch on the big screen and then interact on their smaller screens with the whatever the bidding app it is that you're using. Some charities have even gone so far as to partner with local TV stations to broadcast their soundstage produced gala locally, which is a neat adjustment to it. Phase 3 are going to be micro-galas. When social distancing protocols are lifted and we can gather again, it is not, I repeat, it is not going to look like this. It is not going to look like this. It's not going to look like this. And it's not going to look like this, but this is pretty close. We know that the first real step towards being able to get back to work and have our galas is going to be when we get permission to have a slightly larger crowd. And right now that number seems like it's going to be 50 people. It's going to give us the option to hold micro galas or satellite galas. And I'm sorry for not having a picture that makes a really good example of what a micro gala is going to look like. But you're going to hold an in-person event for your largest donors, sponsors, and most loyal supporters, and broadcast it to the rest of your donors who can't be in the room. And we don't know exactly what the protocols are going to look like, but we can make some educated guesses. So come along with me on this little theoretical timeline here. So this is the layout for a quote normal 350 person gala. We've got all the tables wedged in pretty tight, 2 bars, a stage, we're ready to go. But everything I've read says 50 is going to be the magic number. Facebook, and I know that nobody on this webinar wants to hear this, but Facebook canceled all events of over 50 people until June of 2021. As a corporation, they made that decision. So let's say we're going to make our event for 50 people, but we know that the 60-inch round is normally a 10 top, but let's assume that some new social distancing protocols call for it to become a 6 top. And let's adjust it so they got a better view of the stage, and then add some friends. So now we've got basically a 50-person gala-ish, 8 tables of 6. We're probably not going to need 2 bars for 50 people, and this room is going to be a little smaller than that. So you get the point. Here now we have a 50-person micro gala. 50 people get to watch the gala in person, broadcast the event live to an in-home crowd, and we're going to have issues with lag time between bidders in the room and the at-home crowd, and we're going to have to come up with creative solutions to make sure that the people at home feel engaged and the people in the room don't feel weird being all alone in this ballroom by themselves. But there are creative solutions. We're going to make it work. And I think that the power of getting people back together in a room, even if it's a smaller crowd, are going to outweigh the challenge of having it be a smaller crowd. One thing, we've already seen some really engaging events that look like they would map well to social distancing protocols. Peter, thanks for joining from Sun Valley. This is a shot of one of the 50-person vintner dinners from Sun Valley Museum's 2018 event. And it looks a lot like what we're already talking about, right? And everybody loved this event. Each table had its own little tent. It was outdoors. Obviously, there's 10 people at a table, so we need to change that. But this doesn't look very far from what is being imagined, right? And one of the things, I'll say this right now, usually summertime is a bad time to do events because everybody's traveling and nobody wants to go attend an event. And I actually think if you have an opportunity to make a quick decision and do an event this summer, you'd be in great shape because the weather's great, nobody else is doing events, and everything I've read from health experts says that outdoor events reduce the risk of viral transmission, that it's more likely to be transferred in a ballroom than it is to be outdoors, which again, is not news that we want to hear. But if you're doing an outdoor event, this event, so we'll circle back to this event that was on the picture at the beginning. This is taken from Music in the Vineyards event, I think 3 years ago up in St. Helena. And this was their layout. I didn't change anything. I'm not good enough at Photoshop to make this image look the way it does. And it looks pretty close to what I'm imagining in terms of social distancing protocols. Sure, it's set up for more than 50 people, but you take away 40% and maybe not. So events, doing a micro gala I don't think is going to mean sacrificing everything. I think it's going to mean embracing some interesting, creative approaches to get back to getting people in the room to start fundraising again. Another riff on this theme is to have satellite galas. So you have, this is one of Tom's ideas, I love it. You have multiple micro galas happening simultaneously, maybe in different cities or counties or even states, and they're broadcasting back and forth to each other and broadcasting to a crowd at home. Or you could have a micro gala supported by house parties all happening at the same time. I mean, there are a lot of creative solutions out there, and it's going to be up to us to come up with them and implement them. Phase 4. Hey, Lori. Hey, Ali. I see you. Thanks for joining. Here's your gala. John Muir Health. They're one of the big full-blown galas that we do, 800 plus people. And phase 4 is going to be when we get back to full-blown galas. Once social distancing protocols are completely lifted and we can have normal events again, though, there might still be some people who don't feel comfortable attending large events. I would say plan on it. I recommend plan on keeping a virtual component to your gala that enables attendees who stay at home to still meaningfully participate and feel a part of your organization, part of the community. It'll also give you the opportunity to expand your reach beyond the ballroom doors. So to recap, the 4 phases of galas in 2020. 100% virtual, soundstage galas, micro galas, and I think I'm being really optimistic to say that we'll have any full-blown galas in 2020. I hope we can. I honestly, really, I mean, this is my livelihood as much as it is yours, and I really hope we can get back to it. But I highly recommend planning for not, just in case. If you're bailing out on the webinar from here, just know that that is a good endpoint. But please don't bail. I want you to stay. Let's talk about what this means for how California, how does this play compared to what we've seen from the government? California's 4 stages of shelter in place restrictions and how they intersect. We're going to use California, as I said at the onset, as an example because it is relevant to most attendees, and it is the most limited or thorough or arduous plan I've been able to find yet. So hopefully it offers a good foundation for comparison. The day after I wrote this presentation, Governor Newsom released his plan, and it just happened to be a 4-stage plan. Great minds think alike. So stages 1 and 2 should be extremely familiar to everyone. Stage 1, this is where we've been forever, it feels like, coincides with 100% virtual galas. Stage 2, when they talk about lower risk workplaces and opening up the state, they're talking about, originally the timeline was possibly today, and now they're saying maybe later in this week that they're going to start opening up lower risk workplaces essentially. And I mean, and essentially what that means for us is stage 2 soundstage productions, phase 2 soundstage productions are going to become viable. One thing that's important to note down at the bottom here is that regionality. Counties may choose to relax stricter local orders at their own pace. We've already seen some neighboring cities and counties with different policies. That could become more pronounced, especially in our industry, which could impact how you plan and implement your event. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Phase 3, just 2 things to think about here. One, This is micro-galas. 2, according to Governor Newsom, stage 3 is still months away. Stage 4, the end of the stay-at-home order. Obviously, that's going to be, we can all get back to holding full-blown galas again and selling Warriors packages for what they used to sell for. The timeline on this is, and I quote, "The final stage of reopening fully is contingent on the development of treatment," meaning it is a matter of several months, maybe more than a year. And the optimist in me wants to think, oh, there's no way it's going to take a year. But the realist in me has been beaten down in the last 6 weeks and said, okay, if it's going to be a year, then we all need to plan on making sure that our galas have a virtual component to them in some way, shape, or form. What does this mean for you, other than quite possibly having masks made with your logo on them? Regionality. The lifting of social distancing protocols could possibly be different for every state, or maybe even every county, or even cities in a county. We've already seen different regions in eyesight of each other implement different social distancing protocols. If a neighboring city or a county has a more gala-friendly policy, if it's more viable to do an outdoor event in Napa in July than it is in San Francisco in July, then maybe the thing to do is move your event if your supporters will follow you, because we're still working with a lot of FUD, these fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We're working with a lot of FUD, and we don't know what our supporters are going to do. So as always, it's a conversation. Engage your people and find out if they would support you. But I think if you are still planning on holding a gala in 2020, and I wholeheartedly think you should be, this is not a year to not ask people for money. Everything we've seen in normal years states that if you don't ask somebody for money one year, it is harder to ask them for money the next year. And in a downturned economy, that is even more pronounced, because as people tend to, they don't quit fundraising, or they don't quit donating to organizations. What they do is they fortify the organizations that matter to them most. So instead of giving to 5 events, they give to 2. And if you're not one of the 2 asking them for money, and 5 or 2, those are just hypothetical numbers. But if you're not one of the 2 people asking somebody for money this year, they're not going to think you need it, and it's going to be harder to get it from next year. So I wholeheartedly think you should be planning a gala, but I think you should plan on adding a virtual component and doing some of your fundraising online. Best case scenario, it's just a plan. You don't need it. Worst case scenario, you're ready to adapt. Final thoughts. And then I see there's questions that have been coming in and hands being raised, and I hope you've remembered where that was. I wanted to get through this before we got to the Q&A. Final thoughts. The goal of a gala is threefold. You raise money, you create community, and you bring new supporters into the fold. And a virtual gala can accomplish all 3 of those things. People are doing amazing work creating shared experiences. I did an event on Saturday night, and I wish I had thought to take a screen capture of the moment, because it was done 100% in Zoom. All the presenters our cameras were turned on and off, so we were only on screen, quote, unquote, when our camera was on. And during one of the final performances by a musician, he was rocking out so hard that all of the presenters, and there were about 9 of us, turned our cameras on, and we were dancing along with him while we had a couple of 100 people clapping in the chat. And it was one of the most heartfelt, community-oriented moments I've had in any environment, let alone a virtual one. And maybe it's because we're all at home that these moments of interaction have such weight and comport to them right now. But I 100% believe that a virtual gala can do something that justifies ticket prices, supports your vendors, and gets your community together to support the work that you do. That said, I appreciate you coming. Let me get to all the questions that we have. Joanna Goldman wants to know how I've become an expert in virtual auctions in such a short time. What other sources have I drawn from? Who, in your opinion, is doing virtual events well? It's a good question. Let's stop the share and just get right back to, here's a camera. How have we become virtual auctions? The same way everybody I became an expert in doing regular auctions, which is immersed completely in doing them planning them for the last 6 to 8 weeks. The virtual gala that I did on April 7th was a Zoom-based event, as I stated, and we did a daily run show of that, a rehearsal of that show for 2.5 weeks. So admittedly, it was only one virtual gala, but we We did that show 15 plus times, and in that 15 plus times learned a lot about how to put them on. The work that we've been doing in terms of working with the Lux and working with other organizations, I mean, you learn by doing. Who else is doing good virtual galas and virtual events right now? I would say follow Beth Sandifer Events. She's doing great work. She has 8 events scheduled in the next 2 weeks. A good chunk of them are with Lux, the Lux Productions. And who else? Email me and I'll ping you some more ideas, because I don't want to spend time trying to dig into my memory banks with everybody staring at my face. What is the average duration of a virtual gala? Fantastic question. Totally appreciate you asking it. A virtual gala tends to be 45 minutes to an hour. If you know that when we get people seated for a gala, we typically have 90 minutes to engage and fundraise, and then before they lose interest, we lose their attention span. 90 minutes is about the length. Online, that's even less. So to take that question farther, under normal circumstances, we would get people seated for a gala and we would start the program, and then we would have something entertaining, start the auction, get the crowd warmed up, because one of the things a fundraising auction does is it helps get the crowd motivated and prepared to spend, and it establishes me, the auctioneer, as a credible figure. And then we do the fund the need. So we stop the auction and we have something engaging, some testimonial or something, and then we do the fund the need, and then maybe we have more auction. And we don't have time for that in a virtual gala, where you want to make sure that you're getting to the crowd early before they start to time out. So one of the first things that we do is we were starting our fund to need this past Saturday night by 8:12. And Saturday night's event actually was an hour and a half. It lasted a long time, but it was a different format, I think, radically different than what normally be. Steve of the Housing Industry Foundation, good to see you, Steve, asks, how would broadcasting from multiple locations require tech crews? Would broadcasting from multiple locations require tech crews at each location, or would some of them be Zoom-based from their own computers, et cetera? The answer is yes. I mean, it all depends on how you want to imagine it. So if you are going to have a micro-gala with a bunch of satellite parties happening at people's houses, then you just need to make sure that each house is wired in a way that they could participate. If you're going to do micro-galas in different ballrooms in different hotels or cities or whatever, then obviously each one of them needs to be wired as well. How does the money raised compare in general to a live event? Brilliant question. I'm glad you asked it, because what we're seeing average nationwide, and I am part of a network of fundraising auctioneers across the country. We did a demo run through of this yesterday with a few friends, including my friend Scott from Florida. And I said to Scott, here's the number I've been quoting. How does it hold for you? And he's like, absolutely. That's the gospel truth down here. 90%. So virtual galas are averaging 90% of what they would have, what that particular organization would have been looking to raise if they were doing their live auction and fund the need in person. So, and I want you to think about that, because that's 90% gross, not net. And 90% means that if they're averaging 90%, then there's people who are coming in down here, and there's events that are coming in up here. And that 90% isn't just magically like, oh, ding, put your auction online and you're going to make 90%. No, the people who are making 90% are engaging their crowd and making sure their donors are going to be there and have a message and are communicating need and doing all of the things that you would say are necessary for having a successful fundraising event, whether it's online or in person. I will add that in any type of fundraising auction, whether it is a live auction, a silent auction where you're bidding with pens and paper, online auction, or a virtual live auction, the majority of the bidding takes place in the last 15% of the time. In a mobile bidding auction, 25% of the bids take place in the last 12 minutes. The challenge is always, and in live auctions, people always wait to the last minute to bid. I joke that fair warning is my safe word. So the goal then is to get people butts in seats or faces on screens or pens in hand at the last minute. So no matter what type of auction you're doing, you still need to have people there at the last minute to bid. Do we charge for virtual galas? Yes. We don't charge as much possibly as you would for a live in-person assignment. But the one thing I've learned from this is that it is a workout and the difference is measured. I've always felt that the reason that my career was justified because I have always been able to help charities raise more money than they would have without me. And now on the virtual environment, that is even more true because not everybody is comfortable in standing in front of a camera and talking. Not everybody has the ability to check really quickly and read their script and get back to it. One of the first virtual galas I did, we were having a run through and the executive director was welcoming everybody and it looked like this. Welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you are here. We appreciate each and every one of you joining with us. And it was painful. And I said, hey, while we're at it, maybe you could do a little thing at the beginning where you just welcome everybody for being here and say, hey, this isn't how we wanted to do it. This is not the setting in which we wanted to have our event today, but we appreciate you being here. We've made the pivot, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, that's great. You do it. So one of the things that I've been doing is hosting as much as possible, wherever possible, to help create a more produced and professional feel to the production as a whole. When you use Zoom for the galas, what do the viewer participants see on the screens? That completely depends on the production that you're doing. There's a way to do it in Zoom webinar. So all they see is what's on the screen is what you see basically. And you have to define what's on the screen. You can make it so they see one screen at a time. You can have multiple screens. You can have, you can include video and all sorts of stuff. Zoom productions basically mean that you have to become a production crew. What kind of live auctions would work during shelter in place since we can't travel and most stores are closed? Excellent question. So my follow-up to that would be, well, what kind of organization are you talking about? I mean, I think we're looking at two different things. For normal fundraising auction, I am selling the fantasy of an experience. So you're gonna have this opportunity to sit courtside with the Golden State Warriors and meet the players, right? It's the fantasy of that experience. Now we are selling people the hope of returning to the time when we can do the fantasy of that experience. So a lot of fundraising auction I've been seeing, we're still talking about doing trips. It's just you have to extend the dates and probably make them closer to home. So the trip to Italy, and I'm not trying to slam Italy, I love Italy, and I look forward to the time when we can get back there. But I think I'm not talking about personal preference here, I'm talking about psychological mindscape of your crowd. And I don't know if your crowd's gonna want a trip to Italy next year, let alone right now. So you sell trips with extended deadlines that are regionally acceptable. Like, Hawaii's still good. Tahoe, when Tahoe opens back up to Bend, Oregon, hey, High Desert Museum to Sun River, those sorts of things I think are good. Also sell virtual experiences that are engaging. So a school I'm working with, they said normally what we do is we sell teacher experiences. Then the teacher experiences, they said that teachers can't do the things. I said, well, teachers can still do virtual experiences. So I said, why not get, do you have a teacher who's really good at Minecraft? Can you have a teacher do a lesson for 6 kids on how to build in Minecraft? And like, oh, that'd be great. So, I mean, I think what you have to do is just, you have to adapt. Virtual wine pairing dinner, I think would be great. Or a virtual dinner, some kind of virtual party where it's limited and everybody, you go and you get cocktails and come up with ideas that I think are relevant right now. Are people paying to attend, or is it good people to log on and bid? Great question. I think it depends on the organization. Most events right now are not charging an entry fee. Berkeley Rep did their event a couple weeks ago, and I love this approach because what they did was they said, anybody can attend that makes a donation. Can donate $1. You just need to make a donation to come. And what that did was it got everybody who attended logged into their mobile bidding software. So they were already pre-qualified participants, and it lowered the barrier to participation. It also made sure, you get 1,000 people, which is, I mean, I'm not saying you're going to get 1,000 people, but you get 1,000 people who don't pay anything. Well, you've not made any money. You get 1,000 people at least gave $1 each. You're $1,000 up. But what else are people paying for? I have another event that's saying, hey, we're going to charge $30 because we've got compelling content. I think also there's a way to work with your current vendors like your caterer or restaurant who you normally lean on, and to come up with something that would justify a ticket price, period. Manhattan Beach Wine Auction, Manhattan Beach, we're doing their event at the end of May. Normally a 2,000 person, ginormous, 70 vintners, 50 restaurants tasting affair. Can't do that, obviously. So they're having vintners host virtual wine pairings. You pay X amount in advance. There's a limited number of people. The winery direct ships the wine to you. You save it till that day. Don't pop it open early. And then at 6 p.m. on May 30th, you gather in the virtual wine tasting. You drink the wine, and then with the vintner, and then when the wine tasting is over, you log over to the rest of the gala that's going to happen. So I think there are a lot of ways to invent creative ticket pricing that's going to motivate people to participate. In phase 3, do you imagine the attendees at a 50-person gathering will still want to socially distance? My fear is that 6 people at 60 minutes. My fear, sorry, I'm doing that thing where I don't really read it out loud. My fear is that 6 people at a 60-inch round does not support the necessary distance, and that once alcohol is added, you could be creating a vector of some incautious people. More fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Yeah, Paige, it's a great point. And the answer is, I don't know. I'm trying to envision a future where we can do something, and hopefully micro-galas are going to be it. 6 people at 60 around might not be. So maybe it's 4 tops, or maybe it's 2 tops, and everybody's a couple, and the couples are socially distanced. I think a lot of it's going to depend on, I watch the news every day just like you. I think a lot of it's going to depend on where things wind up in terms of testing and treatment and so on. What I meant to ask is, does the attendee have to buy a ticket to the gala? I believe we need to pay you. Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I think I answered the question about, do attendees pay? But if not, please back. With everyone moving to a virtual platform for galas, auctions, and fundraising, how do you avoid donor fatigue? Most major local fundraisers take place in the summer months. This is from Sun Valley, and many seem to be moving towards mini galas and micro dinners as a new fundraising model. How do we make our event stand out and also refrain from being tone deaf? Whew, that is a big question. That is more question than I think I can answer right now because it is so specific. But specific to Sun Valley, but I think everybody shares the same concern of don't want donor fatigue. How do we stand out? So I'll do my best to juggle here. Give me just a second to have one drink. And of course I inhaled it. So I think it always comes down to engagement. First and foremost, you know who your major donors are. You know that you need to engage them to bring them into the fold to participate. So it starts there. Then you move on to, well, what can we create that's different? And in your case, the Sun Valley Museum's event is wine and vintners. So how can you create something that reflects the normal culture of your event, because your event is radically different than all those other events that take place in the summer. Your event is the wine event. So how can you stay true to that culture and create something that is engaging for people? And I don't want to go deeper on that with everybody. I think that comes back to this for everyone. Your event has a unique culture. Your live in-person event has a unique look and feel to it. The goal of your event, if you're taking it online, is to stay true to that culture and to enable people to engage. So what is it about you and yours that would be different? This event that we did on Saturday night, it was a stand-up comedy night where a bunch of parents normally, a bunch of parents who normally aren't professional stand-up comics train for a few weeks and then do a live show. And this year they couldn't do it live, so they did it virtually. And that is radically different than what yours is going to feel like. And theirs, all the routines were about being stuck at home, right? So I think it's find the answer that is true to the culture of your organization. How many people do you have run the virtual gala? Depends on the production that you're doing. I know it's a stupid answer to your question, but it depends on what type of production you're doing and what platform you're using, right? So if you're doing it in Zoom, you're trying to do it 100% for free in Zoom, then you're going to need at least 4 people just running the production side and handling your giving portion. Speaking of which, I have a question I'd like to ask from you is, how many of you are currently planning on doing a virtual gala? And while I'm answering other questions, you can go ahead and answer that one as well, because I'm curious to find out how many people are a lot of maybes, waiting to sees. We still have 76 people. I appreciate all of you staying with us. If you're using, to go back to your, how do you run a virtual gala, go back to answer that question. If you're using a production company, and I'm not trying to just promote Tom and his platform, but if you're using a production company, you outsource a lot to them. Tom and his crew are capable of handling, creating your video, creating the PowerPoint that runs in the background, all sorts of things. And also, if you don't have somebody in-house who is really, really skilled with your bidding platform and your mobile bidding platform, either start training them now, or bring in somebody like Beth Sandifer who can handle it for you, because the last thing you want to do is be realizing 6 days out that you don't know how to handle your mobile bid. You don't know how to use the number one way you're going to make money. Interesting. So let's end the polling and share the results. 62% of people are waiting to see if they're going to have a virtual gala. 27%, yep, virtual gala is all ready to roll. And another 7 people just, nope, not going to do it. So the next question. Galas that are held in early spring had donation items already secured. How do you see us asking for donation items like live events moving forward? I'm sorry, I do that thing where I read the question to myself and don't read it to you. The galas that were held in early spring had donation items already secured. How do you see us asking for item donations or live events moving forward? I think you've got relationships with, you have relationships with potential donors. You had them before, you still have them now. The fires of Napa and Sonoma in the last 3 years have taught me one thing, is that not everybody gets impacted by a disaster in the same way. And the only way that you can find out how impacted they've been is to acknowledge the disaster and ask. So with Vintners and Napa, I encourage supporters who needed auction items from them to reach out to them and say, hey, I know the fires have hit everybody up there. And we're reaching out to you because you've participated in the past. And if you're interested in participating this year, we'd love to have you. If you can't, we get it. We understand. I think honest communication and conversation is the number one way to go with your donors and your supporters, and of course with your staff and volunteers as well. Okay. Generally, do you know a percentage that it costs for AV, tech uses, et cetera? Should we begin to think about it as we decide on our own format for the event? It's going to cost less than doing a quote normal gala. If you're not renting a room, if you just, I'm sorry, soundstage productions on 100% virtual galas are going to cost less than doing an in-the-room gala. If you're doing a micro-gala, you're still talking about having costs in terms of room rental and everything else, but it remains to be seen if the sound stages that we're talking about are going to replace ballrooms as the location that we're doing events. I think the best thing to do is to reach out to production companies and find out. I know, for example, and I'm quoting these because I am intimately familiar with him. I'm not trying to turn this into the Lux Productions marketing platform, but I know that Tom at the Lux, they're in the $5,000 range for a virtual gala production, which might sound like a lot to you, but if you think about the difference between what your event looks like if it's done in Zoom versus what it looks like with lower thirds and graphics brought up and split into real time, it's a pretty radical difference. Let's see. Are you running live auctions, or do you recommend bidding of all packages exclusively online? And how do you address the lag in responses that may occur digitally? Do you suggest having different levels of the fund a need or a more open-ended ask? And lastly, how should we budget for expenses differently? So yes, we're still doing live auctions online virtually. I recommend it. I think that if you just put the items online as online mobile bidding and just, hey, come bid on these things, and there's no sense of pressure to them, it doesn't have, my job is to create a sense of urgency. And we're in the room and it's like 3,200 is bid now, 34, 34 now, 36, 36, and 38. There's this sense of urgency that gets, automatically the heart rate goes up and you start to really want to make a pledge or bid on the package, right? Online, it loses some of that urgency, loses a lot of that urgency if you're just sitting there staring at your phone and bidding, right? It gains a lot of it back if we're standing there and I'm reading names and I'm saying, oh, okay, I can see Jennifer just bid on the house to Hawaii, but oh, Steve's come back in over top of Jennifer. Jennifer, you better come in at 4,800 or Steve's going to get you. Like, there's still a way to make that engaging. And one of the things, and maybe this is for a later, here, let me share this poll, because what I would love to do is find out if you would like to do something like this again, where a couple weeks from now, we can have a more in-depth discussion specifically about creative virtual auction lots or something else and of this. Okay, great. Wow, overwhelmingly, the responses are coming in. So I'm gonna get a little teary-eyed because I'm really thrilled. We'll do this again, then I'll set something else up. But in terms of my job is to create a sense of urgency. I said that we don't need to think linearly when we're doing something online. And what I mean by that is, okay, normally in a live auction environment, it takes me 3 minutes to sell an auction package. I have to pitch it, I have to start the bidding, and then I have to close the thing. In an online auction, people have been kind of like narrow focused in on like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. But it takes up to 5 minutes because you have to account for lag and you have to give people the opportunity to bid. So if you're talking 5 minutes per auction lot, normally a 20 lot auction is going to take an hour. Well, we already know that's our entire timeline, right? And 20 lots times 5, that's like an hour and a half plus. We ain't got time for that, right? But that's thinking too linearly. So what you can do is you can sell packages in groups and have up to, let's say 4 or 5 auction items. And this is taken from Portland. I saw somebody do this in Portland. I loved it, so I'm rolling with it. But you can do 4 or 5 auction items at a time. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you all. I appreciate your enthusiasm, and so we'll do this again. You can have 4 auction items open at once. You can say, okay, well, lot number 1 is going to be, and here's an idea for an auction package. I'm sorry for answering this late. An auction package that you can have in your gala now is to be at the head table for next year when we are able to be in the room. And so you're selling the hope of being able to get back together and have that auction next year, but also making money now. So you can say, okay, group A, going to be lots 1 through 4 is the virtual, the head table for next year, and the trip to Maui, and the wagon of whiskey, and Tom's laughing because this is exactly what we did on our gala, our demo run through last week, and dinner in your home. And we're going to open the bidding on group A. So you open the bidding and then pitch them. You go through while you're giving people a chance to bid. And then when you go in and start reacting, you say, okay, here we go. And now the bidding started. Oh, we see, and there's a way to create that sense of urgency. So, I mean, do I suggest having different levels during the fund the need? Yes. The challenge is that you can't enforce them. So you can say, hey, we don't want to take pledges at 10,000, 5,000, 2,500, 1,000, 500. You know the routine, but you can't enforce that. So I've seen 2 different galas. I saw it happen 2 different ways. He said, okay, who's going to pledge 10,000? And everybody waited patiently, and it was really sweet. And they let everybody who's going to pledge 10,000 pledge 10,000, and then 5,000. Everybody waited their turn, and they got the calls. And another gala, I said, okay, who's going to pledge 10,000? And who's going to pledge 10,000? And Bob Davis came in at $50. Thanks, Bob. You can't control for it. You just have to. One of the reasons why you become an expert so quickly is you have to learn how to react and roll with these things, and so you do. Are some organizations using companies like Eventbrite to purchase their tickets then with a login link, or it is all done through Greater Giving? That's a good question. I don't think I'm qualified to answer that one. I'll posit that to Beth and find out. I mean, I think the majority of people are using Greater Giving simply because if Greater Giving's your bidding platform, then you would sell your tickets in Greater Giving, so that way you've got everybody logged into your bidding platform. But I don't know if people are using Eventbrite or not. I think I'll look into it, try to find out. Let's see. I'm just going to read this really quickly. Okay, this is the time we usually start auction donation solicitation for online and live auction. We currently have virtually no inventory, and with businesses struggling, how do we create inventory that will support a successful virtual auction? Commission packages are a risk, yes, especially since a couple of the consignment houses have went under in the last 6 to 8 weeks. Commission packages are a risk with so many unknowns. How our supporters are engaged in the new entrant. it's about getting people out there to ask for donations. And I get it. It's a crappy time to be trying to ask people to make donations, especially when there's a report that says up to half the restaurants in San Francisco are at risk of closing and folding. I get it. So and the short answer is you need to be creative, and you need to reach out to people with whom you already have relationships and acknowledge the challenging, I hate the word unprecedented times that we're already in. Yes, can I provide Tom and Beth's contact information? Absolutely. Sorry for not doing so. Here, let me type the answer. Let me make sure that's the right URL, because that would be really stupid. Yep, there's one, and let's see. This is not compelling content. I'm sorry. Here we go. So answered in chat. Sorry, sent you the URLs in chat. This depends on format. Okay. This depends on format, but generally, do you know a percentage change in cost for AV, tech issues, et cetera, should we begin to think about as we decide on our format for this event? No, and the reason I don't know the difference or percentage change on that, and again, this is research I would love to do, and maybe, here, is Tom still with us here? Here, let me find, oh boy, here. I'm gonna promote Tom to panelist. He had 2 accounts logged in. I don't know why. I'm going to promote Tom to panelist. I'm going to hide his videos so we don't have to see. Well, maybe. Tom, you there? Well, as we're figuring out if Tom's, yep, there he is. No.
I have to unmute myself. Sorry.
There we go. Tom needs to unmute himself. So let's hide this other Tom. Compelling content we've got going today. So Tom, the question was, what percentage change in costs for AV and tech issues are people seeing? And I know that that's a loaded question to throw out at you, but
oh man, I wouldn't even know. Yeah. At this point, just like when we produce a live event, there are varying ranges of production level. So, whether we're doing a live event and we've got video packages and lighting packages and audio packages and decor packages, and then as we pivot towards the virtual world, there's going to be different levels of packages that we're going to be able to produce. Greg, you and I right now are working on the difference between the SIP version and the studio version. Well, even the studio version, whether we're doing that in front of a pipe and drape or whether we're doing that in front of a video wall, it raises the level of production that's involved there, which does have some costs involved to it. And virtual event is definitely more inexpensive. The studio's already set up. You're only paying for the rental of the studio. You're not paying for us to install it and take it down.
Okay. And again, I mean, it's a tough question to sort of bring in and just throw out. It's a tough question to try to get answered, and it depends is always a crappy answer, but it depends, right? I mean, if you are the V Foundation and you do your massive concert and fundraising auction and you've got a huge AV budget versus a school that's going to have 4 speakers, a screen, and a projector, right? If your black tie or white tie gala has no auction component, only has ticket revenue, how do you make money? Introduce an auction? I would say introduce a fund a need, at least do an appeal. Ask people for money, ask sponsors to participate. I mean, one of the things that we haven't even hit on this at all is with a virtual event, you actually get a lot more focused attention from attendees. And time check, by the way, we're going to end this in 7 minutes, just so we keep people to, I know we're a broad spec for 20, and I appreciate everybody staying with us for the full time. And as I said, we'll do this again, but we're going to time check this in 7 minutes. But with a virtual production, you have the opportunity to, it's much more focused engagement. Usually I'm working over a talking crowd of people who are eating and drinking and laughing and having a good time. And virtual galas are really different because people are much more focused and engaged. And so that means that for sponsors, the opportunity for engagement is radically different. And so if you're using a production that gives you the opportunity to do thirds and have sponsorship logos and everything else put around the screen, you still have the opportunity to, you justified opportunity to ask sponsors to participate. Are there other platforms than Zoom that you use? I'm thinking of public TV fundraising, and we see the bank of people answering phones. What are we seeing on the virtual galas other than sound stages? That's a big question. I mean, yes, there's lots of other platforms than Zoom. Lots of people are using YouTube Live. As I said in the presentation, if you're doing YouTube Live, then most every smart television right now comes with the ability to watch YouTube or Twitch or, you know, I mean, Hulu, that's different. You don't broadcast to Hulu. Sorry, thinking out loud, stop. But everybody's using pretty much everything at their fingertips right now. You want to do a telethon? Have at it. Thank you, Heather. That's a very sweet. Heather says, I rock. I totally appreciate that. Woohoo, I'll answer that live. How effective is a challenge grant virtually? That's a great question, Jennifer. Thanks for asking. Challenge grants remain extremely effective, especially virtually. And the thing with a challenge grant, as always, is that if you can get a challenge grant that covers your entire appeal, fantastic. If you can get 100 or 200 or however many $100,000 it is to cover your appeal, then woohoo, right? But if you can't, and it can only cover a part of it, then what we used to do is we'd say, okay, well, we're going to apply it at a specific level. So we've got $15,000, we're going to make that our challenge grant at the $1,000 level and try to get people to move up. Well, what we know is that in this environment, you can't control for when you get to the $1,000 level. So what you do instead is you wait until your fund the need, or one option is to wait until your fund the need gets to a certain level in terms of the amount raised. And you say, okay, now we're $30,000 away from our goal. And we've got this great news. We've got a $15,000 challenge grant. So we can get there. If we can get 15,000 more dollars, it'll get us to our goal. Now, obviously, when you're doing that, when you're creating your goal, you have to factor in the challenge grant so that you're not going to too easily match it. How have some of your clients you've had so far determined how to send meals, wine tastings, et cetera, to sponsors, ticket holders for the shared experience during the night of? If a sponsor previously had 20 seats over 2 tables, hard to send meals, et cetera, to all of them. Predetermine key constituents within each sponsorship ahead of time and focus on them. For meals, basically, it's been doing, mostly it's on a pickup basis. So if the restaurant creates the meals and people go and pick them up. But yeah, you can also do delivery. I mean, you're going to, my son's school, amazing. My son's new high school, which is going to start next year, for their gala, we all got deliveries of snacks and stuff right to our front door. You registered in advance and they delivered it right to your front door in conjunction with Buy Right. It was super fantastic. How difficult is mobile bidding? Our supporters are older and many are not tech savvy. So mobile bidding, I'm not going to try to make this sound too easy. It's super freaking easy. With the mobile demo, the demo gala that we did was done on Greater Giving, and we sent links to get registered to my family, my dad and stepmom, and all of my siblings who've never participated in an online auction before. And they actually had a little too much fun because the bidding got unrealistic in our demo, but the hardest part's getting registered. Once you're registered, it's super easy, and registration is simple. And it's just a process. You just have to go through it. And there are lots of ideas, and we can go into these in more detail in the next one, in terms of ways to get people to engage before the night of your virtual gala so that they're already pre-registered and ready to go. What consignment houses have gone under? Great question. Getaway to Give, for starters, is gone. I know that Sojourn Ventures isn't gone under, but they just aren't able to sell any packages right now because everything's in Italy. So somebody else is, we're coming down to the end of the questions. I think it's perfect. Somebody else is with me on the vocabulary fatigue of unprecedented. Yes, and all in this, we're all in this together, unprecedented, part of the family. And will the Warriors win the 21 NBA championship? Yes, I'm guaranteeing a Warriors win right now. follow-up question to my last answer. I've set up an online auctions on Greater Giving for school use. It's super easy to use. Grandparents were a major component. Thank you for that testimonial. Thank you all for joining us. How much do I miss Giants baseball? I miss Giants baseball a ton. I miss a lot of things right now, but more than anything, I miss being able to get together with you and getting to get all your supporters in the same room and having that sense of meaning and accomplishment, right? I mean, that's what we all miss. So I look forward to the time when we can all get back together and do that. For now, thank you. I'm so appreciative of all of you joining us. It means a lot to me. And stay tuned. I will be sending details on the next one, and I will be posting this online for any of your friends, coworkers, organizations that you know who think they could benefit from that. Thanks, all of you, and stay safe, stay sane, and just remember, wherever you go when you get there, use your powers for good.